Chapter 7. Marine Corps. With the last-minute cramming and stress of final exams behind me, I eagerly awaited my test scores. I received passing grades in all of my classes for the first time. My 12th grade year was my best year in school. I didn't sell drugs, I wasn't violent, and I completed the whole year without prolonged absences or dropping out. I must credit most of my success to my cousin Daniel and his lovely wife Erica. They allowed me to live with them during that time. I also lived with them briefly during my 7th grade year. This was my first time since I was 7 that I had stability in my life. Despite Daniel abusing me when I was younger, I felt he cared for me more than anyone else in my family, excluding my mother. Although I didn't feel totally secure because I lived from house to house for the majority of my life, living with Daniel was no different. I was fully aware that he and his wife had no obligation to me. Living with them did earn me the rite of passage to be an average youth. Bathing in a bathtub or taking a shower rather than standing in a small foot tub in several quarts of water was an overwhelming change. Life was less complicated. I ate 3 meals a day and sometimes more. As Daniel would have it, I ate without ceasing. I didn't have to worry about Medea snatching a plate of food out of my hand. I no longer had to rely on eating wild berries, blueberries, or figs to keep from starving. I enjoyed sitting down on a toilet in a sanitary bathroom. It was a far cry from stooping over in the woods, hovering over a newspaper in my living room, or playing the balancing act when I initially attempted to use the filthy toilet in my shack. I was elated about the fact that I was able to eat daily rather than not knowing where my next meal would come from. I was finally enjoying the bare necessities of life that I once held as an inconceivable privilege. I became a miracle in the eyes of many that knew the horrors of my life. I was highly esteemed and greatly celebrated by a select few. My mother, Tricia, and Miss Phillips were the chief principals in all of my emotional support. My high school administration planned a cruise to the Bahamas as a senior trip for my graduating class. The administrators also brought in vendors for us to order our cap and gown for graduation. A class ring could be purchased also, and most students brought one. Times were tight for Daniel and Erica, and they were not able to assist me in paying for any of those items. I was deeply saddened when I visualized myself walking the aisle to accept my diploma without wearing a cap or gown. What an embarrassment, I thought to myself. But shortly afterward, I was just fine. Graduating for me was more than enough. No one thought I would complete high school, including most of my family, teachers, and administration. I'm not sure who gave me the money to pay for my cap and gown, but if memory serves me correctly, it was Miss Phillips. Now, I no longer had to worry about that, but what about that trip to the Bahamas? I knew that taking a cruise to the Bahamas was impossible. How ridiculous, I said, although I wanted to go as badly as anybody else. Unbeknownst to me, Elizabeth, the mother of my good friend Brian, had given him the money to sponsor my cruise to the Bahamas. I know this may sound cliche, but words can't express how happy I was when I found out that I would be going to the Bahamas with my classmates. Yet another issue arose even after my trip was paid for. One of my teacher chaperones told us we would be stopping in Orlando, Florida. They told us this stop wasn't covered by the cruise fee and we needed to bring money with us for food and shopping. Most of my classmates were happy to hear this, but I hated learning of this. I wrestled with the idea of how to avoid being embarrassed in Florida. How would I tell my classmates and teammates that I wasn't hungry or I wasn't interested in going inside Universal Studios? At the very last minute somehow, my mother and one of her cellmates at the jail came up with more than $300 for my trip. I had as much money, if not more, than all my classmates. For the first time, I felt I was on even ground with everyone else. I went to school the day of my trip full of excitement and anxiety. When we started to board the bus, my cousin Tricia drove up and called me to her car. I walked over to her vehicle and said hello. She reached into her purse and handed me a wad of cash. She told me it was for my trip and she didn't want me to travel without any money. I told her my mother and one of her friends in jail had given me $300, but Tricia insisted on me keeping the money anyway and suggested that I use it for extra spending cash if needed. I thanked her right after and I hugged and kissed her. I balled up the cash and stuffed it into my pocket as I boarded the bus. I had about $500 with all of the money combined. Once we arrived in Orlando, all the students started pulling out their cash to show off, and I sat there quietly while they did this. Everyone asked a particular student whose parents normally gave the best of everything how much money he had. He told them he had about $300, and out of them, he had the most money. I felt even more blissful upon discovering that the least of them has been exalted. We had a blast in Orlando. We luckily stumbled across a free Tyrese concert. We rode many of the rides in the amusement park, and I ate whatever I wanted. For the first time, price didn't matter, and that felt good. Most of us went shopping, and I bought a pair of nice tennis shoes. They were a pair of tan-colored Reeboks. This was the first pair of shoes I bought that wasn't paid for with welfare or drug money in nearly 4 years. We stayed overnight in Orlando in a nice hotel. The next morning, I woke up and dove into the swimming pool minutes before we boarded the ship to cruise to the Bahamas. A few of my teammates opened their windows and looked on at me. "Is the water cold?" One of them asked as the other stood by waiting for an answer, to which I replied cheerfully, "No." Moments later, they all bombarded the pool. Cruising to the Bahamas was amazing. The sound of a roaring ocean arrested my attention, and the deep blue waters were more captivating than anything I had ever seen. Once we docked, I went into a store that sold memorabilia and exchanged a few bucks of U.S. currency for some Bahamas dollar bills. I saw so many beautiful women from many different nationalities. I nearly lost my virginity in the Bahamas with another tourist. I don't remember her name, but she was from Lebanon. She had a beautiful physique paired with long black hair. It glistened as the rays of heaven reflected off of it. She wore a black two-piece bikini, and her fingernails were painted black. Her skin was flawless, and she was altogether lovely. She had big oval-shaped eyes that drew me into a trance. Her beauty conquered me, and I was helpless. I abandoned all of my classmates and enjoyed deep conversations with her for what felt like hours. She stared at me and followed me as I treaded the water in the swimming pool. She asked me what my name was and where was I from. She also asked, "Why do you sound like that?" "Like what?" I asked. She responded, "Like a country white person." I chuckled lightly. "No, I don't." I thought I sounded like me. She swam close to me and held my hand and told me that my accent was cute. After a lengthy exchange of flattery, it was quite apparent that the young lady was interested in having more than a conversation. Being the fine Southern gentleman I am, I asked her about her relationship with God. In the most foolish way, I reasoned that if I had sex with this woman, she better have a relationship with the Lord. She told me the startling truth, which was that she didn't believe in God. I looked at her in awe and repeated her words to make sure I heard her correctly. "So, you telling me you don't believe in God?" Upon learning this about the lovely lady, I finally gave in to the continual, "Come on, Brandon, we're waiting for you," from a couple of my classmates. I hugged her one last time and ended our conversation. I walked away with my friends and turned to look at her one last time as she swam. She watched me, also as I walked away. One can fairly say that requiring someone to be a Christian before being intimate with him or her is a questionable and contradictory practice. My classmates and I enjoyed the beautiful views and scenery of the island. I walked to the beach with a couple of friends and dove into the ocean. A couple of local women asked to take a picture of us. We swam back to shore and posed for the ladies as they snapped pictures of us as if they were the paparazzi. The day quickly dwindled to its end, and we boarded our ship. Seeing the sunset over the ocean was a breathtaking sight, the sun rays bouncing across the sparkling deep blue. When we arrived back in Glendale, and I was exhausted, I had taken a picture aboard the cruise ship to give to my mama during my next visit. I returned to school the next day for graduation rehearsal. My mother wrote a letter to the warden requesting to be allowed to attend my graduation. We received word a couple days before graduation that her request had been denied. I was deeply saddened, but Mother reassured me things would be okay. She stood there in the compound of the jail, leaning against the fence, and I listened as she spoke. "Brandon, I'm so proud of you. You came a long way, and I love you." She asked me to stop by the jail before I went to the graduation so she could see me. I agreed, smiled, and told her I loved her too. On the day of graduation, Charles and my cousin were smoking a blunt, a cigar emptied of tobacco and refilled with marijuana. "What's that smell?" "Man, y'all gonna have me smelling like weed." They laughed as if I had told a prize-winning joke of the day. Charles offered me the blunt, and I told him no thanks. I was known for selling weed and many other drugs, but I wasn't much of a user. They kept pressuring me, and by that point, I was already high from the contact smoke. They rolled the windows up and told me I was getting high that day, one way or another. My cousin blew me a charge, which meant he blew smoke directly into my nostrils as I inhaled. I coughed, my eyes watered, and I began to feel enlightened. Weed affects everyone in different ways. For me, it made me more talkative. I would become the greatest philosopher in an instant after only a few puffs of marijuana. About 9 or 10 charges later, I was high as a space shuttle. My eyes were bloodshot, red, and hazy. My breath reeked of alcohol because I had been drinking 40 ounces of Old English 800 malt liquor all day. My Marine Corps recruiter called me on the cell phone he had given me several weeks prior. I straightened up my shirt before answering it as if he could see me through the phone. Sergeant Kelly wanted us to meet him at the corner store so he could drive me to the graduation. My brother and cousin laughed because I was high and I smelled like alcohol and weed. I was about to get into a vehicle with a recruiter from the United States Marine Corps in that condition. I got out of their car and mistakenly left behind my tassel. I sprayed lots of cologne over myself to mask the scent of weed. Sergeant Kelly and I drove to the jail to visit my mama. We stood by a fence near the jail yard and waited for her to walk over. She ran to the fence with bright beaming eyes and congratulated me. She handed me a card through the fence that she and another inmate handcrafted themselves. The enclosed caption read, "Brandon, I know you're a man now, but when I see you, all I see is my baby. I love you very much." I introduced Sergeant Kelly to my mother, and they politely greeted one another. "Take care of my baby," she warned him sternly. "I will, Miss Jackie." He told her to offer reassurance that my decision to join the United States Marine Corps was a good one. We ended our conversation by saying, "I love you," to one another, as we normally did. The recruiter and I drove to my high school. Once we arrived, I realized I looked a little different than my classmates. They were dressed in black gowns, orange tassels, and black caps. I had everything except my tassel. I left it behind in my brother's car earlier. Our graduating class got in line and Principal King was about to begin commencement. I was so high and intoxicated, I could hardly stand steady in line. When my name was called to receive my diploma, it was a dulled moment. I was miserably drunk and didn't even smile. I was focused on not falling down and embarrassing myself, and I was a bit disappointed with the fact that the warden wouldn't allow my mother to attend. The jail she was in was located roughly 10 miles away from my high school. I wanted to slap that warden in his face for failing to be fair and impartial. This was it. I had finally graduated amidst the popular belief that I wouldn't. I rejoiced and thanked God repeatedly. My journey to completing high school was a long one. Failing the 4th grade twice, dropping out of middle school twice, and nearly dropping out a third and final time in the 9th grade. A few weeks had passed since graduation, and it was time for USMC basic training. I was very pleased to be a part of the few, the proud, the Marines. I hadn't picked a military occupation specialty, a MOS, yet because my recruiter advised that more jobs would open once I started basic training. I was excited to be a part of something and have a sense of belonging. Unlike most of my life, for the first time, I was no longer a homeless youth searching for his way. The day of my departure for USMC basic training camp, I visited my mother at the jail. We ate lunch, prayed, laughed, and prayed some more. My mother was proud of my decision and happy to see me off of the street, but she was also concerned about my safety in event of a war. My mother and I had discussed me taking full custody of my 3 younger siblings, Jess, Star, and Derek. She agreed that once I completed basic training, I could take custody. My Uncle Andrew drove me to the airport in Memphis. I hugged him and told him I loved him once we arrived. He wished me well and drove away. I was embarking on yet another challenge, going to an unfamiliar place filled with people I didn't know. This was a huge leap for a young, underprivileged teen from the rural South. This was my first time flying. In fact, it was my first time leaving Tennessee, not counting my senior trip. I had mixed feelings about it all. I was excited and I felt a little lonesome at the same time. I boarded my flight and began to pray for a safe flight and for God to protect my mother and siblings. The captain said that we may experience some turbulence during our flight to San Diego, California. I had no idea what turbulence was, and I was too embarrassed to ask anybody what it meant. After experiencing what felt like a compact car driving on a roadway filled with small potholes, I quickly concluded that this was the turbulence the captain warned us about. He announced after a few hours in the air that we would be landing at San Diego International Airport. I looked out of the window and embraced California with a smile. I exited the plane and walked through the terminal, looking for the Marine Corps official my recruiter said would be waiting for me and the other recruits. I saw a large group of recruits standing together near an exit, chatting amongst themselves. They had formed a circle, and a few of them wore smirks on their faces with their chests poked out. The few, the proud, the Marines, I said with sarcasm as I greeted each one of them. Why does he talk like that? One recruit said to another. Then another recruit quickly intervened by telling the two others to mind their business. This man here is from the South. My mother says nothing but good people come from the South. Now isn't that right? What's your name again? Brandon. My name is Brandon, and yes, your mother is right. Everyone knows the South is filled with God-fearing Christians who are unburdened with wrongdoing. All of them looked at me with a blank stare. They didn't know if I was serious or joking. There they are, said one of the Marines who had come to escort us to Camp Pendleton. They ushered us to the airport parking lot where a charter bus awaited. There was a moment of extreme silence after we boarded the bus. I wondered if the entire basic training was going to be this quiet. Within a few minutes, several drill sergeants blitzed the bus shouting orders. They gave orders with the expectation of causing confusion and evoking fear. Each drill instructor gave contradictory instructions. One of them boarded the bus yelling, "Attention! On your feet, woman! Why in the hell are you still seated? Sit the fuck down! Sit the fuck down, maggots!" Another instructor shouted. This sort of drill continued for several minutes. I looked at the other recruits and every one of them was visibly shaken. I, on the other hand, was deeply amused at the instructor's attempt to be gritty. The instructors gave us blindfolds and instructed us to put them on. Once we had the blindfolds on, the instructors inspected us to make sure we wore them properly and couldn't see. Shortly afterwards, we departed the airport for Camp Pendleton. I heard someone crying along the way and the drill instructor offering to throw him off the bus if he didn't stop. I tried to trace every turn and count every stop we made as we traveled. At one point, it seemed like the driver was driving in circles. The bus made a final stop and the drill sergeants ordered us to take off the blindfolds. It was around 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening when we arrived at the camp. The basic training camp looked similar to a university campus with large patches of sand scattered around. It took a while for me to get used to the humidity. "Who in the hell asked you to put those blindfolds on?" a master sergeant asked with the instructors who ordered us to wear them standing in the background. "Surely not one of these fine gentlemen, did they?" "You over there, who told you to put on the blindfold?" The recruit answered that he didn't know. "You are fucking lying. Who let this goddamn liar into the United States Marine Corps? Faces in the dirt," was one of the first orders I could remember receiving at Camp Pendleton. We all hopped off the bus and dropped to the ground unilaterally, faces planted in the dirt, and waited for our next command. A drill instructor yelled, "On your feet!" and we jumped to our feet. Then we were escorted to a medical clinic to get a series of shots. I have no earthly idea what types of shots we got. All I remember is being sore wherever the needle stuck me. I sat on my left butt cheek for several hours while waiting to get the remainder of my shots because the right one was too sore. In the clinic, I saw hundreds, if not thousands of recruits who arrived sometime in the same day. We came from many different parts of the country, but we all shared the same goal: protect the nation we love. We remained in the clinic until 3 a.m. the next morning. A drill instructor came over and gave those of us who had received a certain number of shots permission to go to sleep. He told the others to get rested once they were done. I fell into a deep sleep and dreamed I was still in Glendale until recruits woke me as they passed to get their shots. I dozed off again to be awakened this time by a drill sergeant who escorted us back to our barracks. There, we stood at attention by our bunks and waited to be issued our gear. We were also told that we would meet the senior drill instructor. We were issued several jogging suits with the USMC anchor and globe embroidered on them. We received one pair of sneakers that were referred to as Go Fasters. We were given a shaving kit, soap, and other hygienic essentials. We stored all of these items in a chest located at the foot of our bunks. The senior entered the room and the drill instructor ordered everyone back to attention. "At ease," the senior said as he walked past without making eye contact. The senior spoke to us individually and as a group. He looked at my ASVAB score and told me that I scored high enough to join the Air Force and asked why I joined the Marines. I told him that the Marine Corps seemed to be more reputable, and I cited how much I loved the blood-striped trousers. He smiled for a tenth of a second and said, "Now that's a true jarhead." I told him I also joined the USMC so that I can adopt my younger siblings. "Very impressive," he said. "And where are your parents?" "I never knew my dad, and my mother is in jail, sir." "Well then, seems like you made the right choice. Welcome to the Corps, son." We moved into formation and marched outside to see where everyone was with marching and basic military life. When I enlisted in the Corps, I entered as an E2 private first class because of the 2 years I served in JROTC. Many of my peers were E1 privates. There was an average of 50 people in a platoon, and there were about 20 different platoons that I saw training concurrently. The drill sergeant ordered us to form a single file column. In layman's terms, that translates to forming one line. "At the sound of my command, I want you all to dress right dress." And he had other drill instructors demonstrating what this meant. To dress right dress, we extended our left arm towards the right shoulder of the person standing next to us to form an equal space between each of us. The drill instructors put us at ease and yelled because many of us didn't execute the command correctly. One of the instructors called another E2 out of formation to demonstrate. He did so with excellence, so the drill instructor began to give him other commands that had not been shown yet, and he demonstrated those as well. "Great job, Leatherneck. You are hereby pronounced our platoon leader. How do you like your new job, Maggot?" "Good, sir. I love my job, sir," he said with enthusiasm. We continued a series of drills for the rest of the day and days following. We skipped lunch because so many people made mistakes, but we all ate dinner. As punishment, the instructors told us we would eat, shower, and shave by the numbers. As I didn't know what this meant until we walked into the mess hall and I heard other instructors counting aloud as recruits from other platoons ate. 31,000, you're done. Get up, move, now." And they had hardly dug into their dinner. I imagine they were some well-to-do lads eating with utensils and properly cutting their meats. I, on the other hand, ate by the numbers all my life. That is, if I ate anything at all. When it was our platoon's turn to eat, I got my tray, and before the last person sat at my table to eat, I was already done. "What the fuck happened to your tray, maggot? Did you give your food away?" "No, sir," I answered the drill instructor. "I ate it, sir," I exclaimed loudly. He walked close enough to me to put his lips in my ear. Whispering softly, he asked, "Do you know what?" "No, sir. I didn't give my tray away, sir." Then he began to scream in my ear at the top of his voice. "Now don't let that happen again, you fucking cunt." Meanwhile, one of our instructors arrived at 31,000, which was our stop time. We emptied our trays and got back into formation and marched to our barracks. I admired the hotshot that instantly won the favor of the drill instructors and became our platoon leader. I wished it were me. I could do all the things he did. I believed I could have easily executed every command as he did. Little did I know, time would soon show the drill instructors my knowledge and skill. We were marching to our barracks once, and our platoon leader made a mistake that led the entire platoon into the middle of another platoon's formation. After the drill instructors from both platoons finished yelling at him, I felt sorry for our platoon leader. "Faces in the dirt," our instructor said. "One for all and all for one. You will pay the price. Get up and double knot your go fasters shoes. We're going to do a little PT." He ran us senseless. We were coughing and spitting up mucus. A few passed out and were taken to the infirmary. Some stopped running and walked until they got yelled at by other drill instructors that appeared from nowhere. After a rigorous 3-mile uphill run, we got into formation and marched back to the barracks. The instructor had chosen the fastest guy during our run to be our new platoon leader. The guy looked like Vin Diesel's double with twice the muscle. We marched to our barracks without any hiccups and started showering. After I finished, I got in line to shave. I didn't have a single strand of facial hair, but the drill instructors insisted that everyone shave. One of them stood behind those of us that were shaving and started counting. 1,010, put down your razors. He walked over to each of us and inspected our faces. "Dismissed," he said dreadfully after he discovered not a single one of us had any facial hair remaining after we shaved. We got into our bunks and we were told to rest up for the long day that awaited us tomorrow. We marched and performed various drills nonstop throughout the following morning. A certain drill instructor tried to single me out as he did to everyone within my platoon. He looked down at me and asked, "Who are you?" I told him my name, and he replied, "That's not your name, son. Your name is Recruit. Do you understand?" "Sir, yes, sir. My name is Recruit, sir." A couple of other drill instructors joined in. "Are you smiling, son?" another said. "I'll wipe that silly smirk off your face," as he approached me nearly nose to nose. I found it humorous that these well-groomed instructors tried to intimidate me. The more they yelled and shouted, the more they provoked me to laugh. Thank God I restrained myself. I held it in. I assumed they weren't going to shut up unless I appeared to be shaken by their antics. Therefore, I pretended to be nervous in hopes of shutting them up. It worked, and they all backed away like a pack of wolves, continuing the drills. The next morning was uniform inspection. We all dressed in our BDUs and commando boots. My boots were polished to perfection, and I wore my uniform perfectly, just as I did when I was in JROTC. The drill instructors didn't find anything wrong with my uniform, but they had many questions about my tattoos. When asked, I told them Brad was my nickname, and the acronym LIVE, L-I-V-E, stood for Living for Eternity. "How patriotic," the instructor said, and walked away, exclaiming how ugly my tattoos were. As the days grew into weeks, I noticed a couple of instructors watching me. They would stand at a distance and stare in my direction as they talked amongst themselves. You there, you will be our new platoon leader. That other guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing." With my eyes fixed on my drill instructors, I tried to decipher if they were really talking to me. "Are you deaf? Get over here and take them to chow now. Move, maggot." "Platoon, attention," I commanded hesitantly. "Forward." Brief pause. "March." To the mess hall we marched. I was shocked that the instructor chose me. Although I considered myself a standout recruit, I didn't expect anyone else did. The drill instructors marched alongside me, calling cadence. "Your left, your left, your left, right." We marched to his cadence and yelled, "Delta Company," at the end of each cadence. We ate chow and reported to our barracks for hygiene. The drill instructors gave us ink sticks, ink pens, information on the history of the Corps, and lectured us on it. Once they concluded the lecture, they ordered us to get well rested for tomorrow. I was told by one of the instructors that I was doing a great job. It was highly unusual for me because no one ever told me I was doing well. One of the drill instructors punished me because a few recruits in my platoon were off step, and the instructor said that embarrassed him. "On your faces in the dirt." I dropped down and put my nose in the dirt. My body was parallel to the ground in a push-up position. He stood over me and shouted, "Up, down." He did this until my arms were shaking, and it was apparent I wasn't physically capable of doing any more push-ups. "Up, down. On your feet." This motivated me to take a stronger position as a leader and take command of my platoon, as the instructors did. Once I took that approach, I won instant notoriety from many of the drill instructors, but I also inherited more criticism from others. I remember one day I was leading a small squad of 6 or 7 men, and I saw a lieutenant approaching. Whenever military personnel see a superior officer, they are supposed to salute them, and in turn the officer will say, "As you were," signifying for the subordinate to continue as he or she was before. My men and I stopped and saluted the officer. We waited for him to say, "As you were," but he never did. He kept walking. I saw the same officer get saluted by a group of white recruits, and he told them to carry on as they were, and they went on about their business. This happened periodically during basic training. There was a time when I was walking to the infirmary, and I stopped to salute 2 white officers. Both walked past me without acknowledgement, and one whispered something to the other, and they started laughing. At that point, I put myself at ease and continued walking to the infirmary. I began to question the character of certain officers. I continued successfully as a platoon leader and won the respect of many of my peers, minus those who envied me because they wanted to be the platoon leader.